I was 35 the day I stood on that stage holding my diploma with trembling hands, staring out at a sea of strangers cheering for their loved ones. 5 empty seats sat in the front row, reserved for the people I had begged to be there: my parents, my children, my husband. Seats that stayed vacant the entire afternoon, mocking me with their silence. Everyone around me had flowers, hugs, and cameras flashing in their faces. I had a degree in one hand and a hollow ache in my chest. That moment should have been one of triumph. It took me 5 grueling years of night classes studying after long shifts at work, balancing deadlines with the chaos of raising 2 children. There were mornings when I'd wake at 5:30 a.m., scrambling to make lunches, rushing out the door before the kids were even fully awake, only to spend the evening in a cold lecture hall while my husband tucked them into bed. And there were nights I would stay up past midnight, eyes burning from the glow of the laptop, forcing myself to finish assignments while the rest of the house slept peacefully. I told myself it would be worth it, that one day my children would watch me cross the stage and understand what determination meant. I pictured my daughter whispering to her brother, "That's Mom," and my husband clapping proudly in the front row. I believed that 5 years of sacrifice would finally be validated in one unforgettable day. But when I looked out into that auditorium, there was no husband's steady gaze, no children's eager faces, no parents' teary smiles, just 5 empty chairs. And I knew exactly why. My brother Derek, he had scheduled one of his infamous barbecues on the very same day, a spectacle with pool games, catered food, and 30 guests. A party he insisted couldn't be moved. And just like every other chapter of my life, my parents, my husband, even my children chose him over me. My father grilling burgers in Derek's backyard, my mother laughing by the pool, my kids running with cousins. It was all documented online in smiling photos posted while I stood alone trying to pretend the polite applause of strangers was enough. That wasn't the first time Derek had stolen the spotlight, and it certainly wasn't the first time my parents had chosen him. I grew up knowing he was the golden child, the one who was fun, charismatic, easy to love. They never missed his football games, but they missed my spelling bees, my science fairs, even my first piano recital. I was the responsible one, the serious one who didn't need attention. And somehow, that label followed me into adulthood, used as an excuse for why I was always expected to understand, to forgive, to accept being second place. I thought my husband Nathan would be different. I thought he'd see the effort I put in the way I carried guilt on top of exhaustion, how I gave up weekends and family trips for a better future. But even Nathan betrayed me. A week before graduation, I overheard him telling Derek he might take the kids to the barbecue instead of the ceremony. He thought I wouldn't find out. When I confronted him, he sighed and said, "It's just a graduation ceremony. The kids will be bored. Just a graduation. Just a piece of paper." Those words cut deeper than any insult. 5 years of blood, sweat, and tears dismissed as just. It felt like my entire life was being minimized into a footnote, like my dreams were nothing more than an inconvenience to the people I loved most. So I walked across that stage alone. I held my head high, but inside I was breaking. And when I stepped outside, families swarmed the lawn with balloons and flowers, snapping photos of graduates with glowing smiles. I scrolled through my phone, desperate for a message that said, "We're proud of you." Instead, I saw Derek's barbecue plastered across social media. My kids were roasting marshmallows with their cousins, while my parents raised glasses of wine. Nathan was right there in the photos, smiling like he had no wife who had just achieved the greatest milestone of her life. I wanted to scream, to smash my phone against the concrete. Instead, I found a quiet corner behind the science building and let myself fall apart. Mascara-smeared shoulders shaking, I cried like I hadn't cried in years. It wasn't just about graduation. It was about every birthday forgotten, every sacrifice unacknowledged, every time I was told to be the strong one while everyone else got to be celebrated. And as I cried, something inside me hardened. Maybe it was rage. Maybe it was clarity. But in that moment, I realized I couldn't keep living as an afterthought in my own family's story. Their betrayal had broken me, but it had also freed me. For the first time in my life, I felt the beginnings of a resolve I didn't know I was capable of. Because if they wouldn't stand by me, I would learn to stand by myself. and I would uncover every truth that explained why I had been invisible for so long. When I got home that night, diploma clutched tightly in my hands. The house was dark. No balloons, no flowers, not even a card left on the kitchen counter. I walked into the living room and found the TV still glowing with a paused baseball game, a plate of half-eaten barbecue ribs sitting on the table. My husband and kids had come home before me, but there was no sign they had even noticed I was gone. I went upstairs to check on the children. They were fast asleep, faces sticky with marshmallow, their hair smelling faintly of smoke from Derek's fire pit. For a moment, my anger softened. They were innocent, too young to understand the magnitude of what I had accomplished. But then I thought about how someday they might think it was normal to disregard someone's sacrifices to laugh off another person's achievements just like everyone had done to me. And I knew I had to change that. Nathan was snoring lightly when I entered our bedroom. I stood at the foot of the bed, diploma still in my hand, and stared at him. How could he have chosen a barbecue over me? How could he have taught our children through his actions that their mother's milestones were less important than a few beers and burgers with Derek? I wanted to wake him, to shout, to demand an explanation. But I knew the answer already because it was easier. Because in our family, Derek always came first, and I had been conditioned to come last. I set the diploma gently on the dresser and crawled into bed, but sleep didn't come. My mind replayed every memory I had buried. Like the time I was 12 and won a writing competition, but no one came to the award ceremony because Derek had sprained his ankle in football practice. Or when I graduated high school with honors and my parents left the celebration early to take Derek to a party. Even my wedding day had been overshadowed. My parents gushed more about Derek's new promotion than about the vows I exchanged. And now even Nathan had joined in, feeding into the cycle I had lived my whole life. The next morning I went downstairs to the sound of laughter. Nathan and the kids were at the breakfast table scrolling through Derek's photos from the barbecue. My parents had commented on every single one. My brother had written a caption that made my stomach turn: family first. Nothing matters more. Family first. The hypocrisy of it nearly made me choke. What they meant wasn't family first, it was Derek first. It always had been. I poured myself coffee and said nothing. But inside I was boiling. That's when I realized something. If I stayed silent again, if I swallowed my hurt like I had for 35 years, nothing would ever change. They would keep erasing me until there was nothing left. That afternoon I drove to my parents' house. My hands shook on the steering wheel the entire way. When I walked in, my mother was in the kitchen humming as she washed dishes. My father sat at the table with the newspaper. They looked up, surprised to see me. I placed my diploma on the table in front of them. "This happened yesterday," I said. My voice cracked, but I held my ground. "I graduated. I worked for 5 years. And none of you came." My father frowned, shifting uncomfortably. My mother opened her mouth, but I held up my hand. "Don't say you're sorry. Don't say you forgot. You knew. You chose not to come. You chose a barbecue." For once they were silent. And in that silence, I realized the truth. They weren't sorry. They didn't regret it. To them, it had simply been another decision, one that weighed my achievement against Derek's entertainment and found me lacking. I left the diploma on the table and walked out. My legs were trembling, but my chest felt lighter than it had in years. It wasn't revenge yet, not even close. But it was the first time I had forced them to face what they had done. Driving home, I thought about Derek, about how he always seemed to pull everyone into his orbit, leaving me in the shadows. I wondered how much of it was his fault and how much of it was the web my parents had spun around him since childhood. I wondered if Nathan even realized the damage he'd done, or if he too had been pulled into the belief that I was strong enough to live without recognition. But deep down, I also knew this was only the surface. Families don't abandon you so easily unless there's something deeper at play. And I was determined to find out what it was. I didn't have to wait long for the cracks to show. A few days after leaving my diploma on my parents' table, my brother Derek called me. His tone was sharp, impatient, the way it always was when he felt inconvenienced. "Why are you making Mom upset?" he demanded. "She said you threw some tantrum about graduation." "A tantrum?" That's what he called 5 years of sacrifice ignored, 5 years of studying, until my eyes blurred 5 years of missing dinners and bedtime stories with my kids. A tantrum. I swallowed my rage and said, "You knew the date. You knew how important it was. You hosted your barbecue anyway." He scoffed. "It's not my job to plan my life around yours. Everyone had a good time. Why can't you just be happy for us?" And in that moment, I realized something chilling. Derek wasn't just selfish. He truly believed the world revolved around him, and worse, my parents had fed that belief his entire life. He didn't see my absence at the barbecue as strange. He saw their absence at my graduation as normal. I hung up the phone shaking, but also curious. What had made Derek so untouchable? Why did my parents bend over backwards for him while leaving me to fend for myself? I started asking questions quietly, reaching out to relatives who weren't always in the inner circle. And slowly, pieces of a darker picture began to emerge. One of my aunts, after a long silence on the phone, finally whispered, "You don't know, do you?" She hesitated, then sighed. "When Derek was 17, he got into serious trouble. He could have gone to jail. Your parents covered it up. They paid off people, pulled strings, sold things they never told you about. Ever since then, they've treated him like glass. They protect him from everything because they're terrified of what he'll do if he has to face consequences." My stomach twisted as the puzzle pieces locked into place. The endless favoritism, the blind loyalty, the way they always expected me to be the strong one. It wasn't just about love. It was about fear. My parents had chosen to shield Derek at all costs, even if it meant sacrificing me. And suddenly, my husband's betrayal at graduation cut even deeper. Because Nathan knew. He had married into this family, seen the way they treated Derek, and instead of standing by me, he'd joined them. He'd taken my children to that barbecue because it was easier to swim with the current than to fight for me. The realization made me sick. For years, I had told myself I was building a better future for my kids, for Nathan, for us as a family. But what kind of example was I setting? That a woman should work herself to the bone only to be dismissed, erased, and forgotten. That loyalty meant giving and giving while others took without a thought. I couldn't let that be the lesson my children absorbed, so I started documenting everything. I gathered photos of the empty seats at graduation, screenshots of Nathan's dismissive texts, social media posts from the barbecue. I printed my aunt's email explaining Derek's past, even if it was vague. Piece by piece, I built a record of what had been done to me, of how this family had decided I didn't matter. I wasn't sure what I would do with it all yet. Part of me wanted to expose them publicly the way they had humiliated me by omission. Another part of me wanted to keep it close, a weapon I could wield when the time came. But one thing I knew for certain: I wasn't going to be silent anymore. The first test of my resolve came sooner than I expected. The following weekend, Nathan asked casually if we were going to Derek's house for another gathering. "He's grilling again," he said, as if nothing had happened. I looked at him across the kitchen table, the man who had once promised to cherish me, and felt a coldness settle in my chest. "No," I said. "You can go if you want, but the kids are staying with me." He frowned, caught off guard. "Don't make this a big deal." But it was a big deal. It was my line in the sand. For the first time in years, I wasn't bending. And as his silence stretched between us, I realized something monumental. He didn't know who I was becoming. He didn't realize the woman he had always overlooked was finally ready to fight. What I didn't know then was how messy that fight would become. Because once you start pulling at the threads of long-buried family secrets, everything unravels faster than you can imagine. And what lay at the center of it all would leave me questioning not just my marriage, not just my parents, but even the foundation of who I was. The unraveling began with a phone call I wasn't meant to overhear. Nathan had left his phone on the counter one evening while he went to shower, and it buzzed with a familiar name: my mother. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but when I saw her name flashing, I couldn't help but press the speaker. Her voice was sharp, urgent. "You need to keep her calm, Nathan. She's stirring up trouble about Derek again. The last thing we need is her digging too deep." My stomach dropped. "Keep me calm. Digging too deep." I froze as Nathan's voice came muffled from the bathroom, just close enough for the call to pick him up. "I'm trying, but she's angry. She won't let this go. I don't know how much longer I can keep her quiet." Quiet? That word sliced through me like a knife. My husband. The man who should have been my partner was conspiring with my mother to silence me. They weren't just ignoring me anymore, they were actively working against me. When Nathan came out, towel around his waist, he looked startled to see me holding his phone. I didn't scream, didn't throw it at him. Instead, I handed it over and said very calmly, "We'll talk tomorrow." Then I walked upstairs and locked the bedroom door behind me. All night I lay awake, piecing things together. My parents' obsession with Derek, their willingness to sacrifice me, Nathan's complicity. I had always thought it was favoritism, unfair, cruel favoritism, but it was more than that. It was control. They had decided long ago who was worth protecting, who was worth investing in, and who was expendable. And I had allowed myself to play the expendable role, but not anymore. The next morning I confronted Nathan. "How long have you been siding with them?" I asked. My voice shook, but not with fear, with fury. He sighed, ran a hand through his hair. "It's not like that. Your mom just worries. Your dad, too. Derek? He can't handle stress. They think you're stronger." That word again. Stronger. Always stronger. Strong enough to be ignored, to be forgotten, to be erased. I wanted to scream, but instead I whispered, "Or maybe just strong enough to sacrifice." Nathan didn't deny it, and his silence told me everything. Over the next week, I became a shadow in my own home, but not the kind they were used to. I was quiet, observant, collecting. Every conversation, every slip of the tongue, every text message I could screenshot. I began piecing together a picture that was darker than I had imagined. Derek wasn't just the golden child, they were all protecting him from something catastrophic. One evening, while Nathan was distracted in the living room, I searched through his desk. Tucked beneath tax papers, I found an envelope marked with my brother's name. Inside was a copy of a settlement agreement. My breath caught as I scanned the words. Years ago, Derek had been accused of assault. The case had been buried under non-disclosure agreements and payouts with my parents' signatures stamped at the bottom. The blood roared in my ears. This was why they shielded him. This was why they expected me to stay quiet. They hadn't just abandoned me, they had chosen to protect a predator at all costs. My hands shook as I stuffed the papers back, but my mind was blazing with clarity. For the first time, I understood the depth of their betrayal. My life had been minimized, my triumphs ignored because they were too busy cleaning up Derek's messes and hiding his sins. And Nathan had known. He had married me, fathered my children, and still chosen to side with them instead of standing by me. That night, while my family laughed over dinner as if nothing were wrong, I excused myself and locked the bathroom door. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, eyes red, chest heaving. And I made a promise to myself. I would no longer beg for love from people who had built their lives on lies. I would no longer carry the shame they had handed me. I didn't know yet how I would do it. I didn't know if it would be through truth revenge or simply walking away. But I knew this everything they had buried was going to come to light. And when it did, none of them would be able to look at me the same way again. The final breaking point came on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of day when families are supposed to gather for comfort and warmth. Derek had invited everyone over again, and Nathan insisted we all go. But I couldn't not after what I had discovered. I told him I was staying home. He narrowed his eyes, but he didn't push. He knew something in me had changed, and maybe he was afraid of what I might reveal if pressed. So I stayed behind, and I waited. Hours passed. The house was silent, and I sat with the settlement papers spread out in front of me, my diploma beside them. Two artifacts of my life, one representing everything I had fought for, the other representing everything they had destroyed. And somewhere between those two symbols, I found my decision. When Nathan came home that night with the kids, I was ready. My children ran upstairs to play, and I placed the envelope on the table in front of him. He froze when he saw it. "Where did you?" he began, but I cut him off. "I know everything I said." My voice was steady, calm in a way that frightened even me. "I know what Derek did. I know how my parents covered it up, and I know you helped them keep me quiet." Nathan's face drained of color. He tried to explain, to excuse it. He said he'd been protecting me, protecting our children, that dragging up the past would only hurt us all. But I saw the truth in his eyes. He hadn't been protecting me. He had been protecting himself, protecting the comfortable lie he had chosen to live inside. I told him I wanted space. That night, I packed a bag for myself and for the kids. We went to stay with a friend, and for the first time in years, I felt air in my lungs, freedom. The fallout came quickly. When my parents realized I had the papers, they begged me not to expose Derek. They called me dramatic, selfish, accused me of trying to destroy the family, but their pleas no longer held power over me. For the first time, I wasn't the quiet daughter, the overlooked sister, the accommodating wife. I was the woman who knew the truth and who finally understood her worth. I didn't run to the press. I didn't need to. The power wasn't in burning them down publicly, it was in reclaiming my life privately. I filed for separation from Nathan. I cut contact with my parents, and I sat down with my children, gently but honestly, and told them that their mother had achieved something great, that her graduation had meant the world, even if no one else had shown up. I wanted them to know the truth, not just about me, but about themselves. That their achievements, their dreams, their voices would always matter, no matter who tried to silence them. Months have passed since then. My parents and Derek continue their lives in their small bubble, pretending everything is fine. Nathan drifts in and out, still trying to convince me I've overreacted, still refusing to see that the world he chose to uphold was built on betrayal. But I no longer carry the weight of their choices. I carry only my own. I keep my diploma framed on the wall, not because it represents education alone, but because it represents survival. It is proof that I can build something for myself even when no one believes in me. Proof that I am not expendable. Proof that I am more than the role they tried to force on me. And when I look back on that day, on the empty seats at my graduation, the silence where love should have been, I no longer see weakness. I see the moment I finally woke up. The moment betrayal became clarity, and clarity became freedom. If you've ever been abandoned by the people you thought would stand by, you know this. You don't need their applause to validate your worth. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away and write your own story. If my story resonated with you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, subscribe for more, and leave me a comment with your own story of survival and strength. You are not alone.